Well, here we are at the beginning of a brand new week, day number 8. And you know that the number 8 means a new beginning. And so this is the beginning of a new week. And we ask you to remember that as we take the journey together, that as we asked you to consecrate with us on last week to fast at least one 24-hour period, whether that was 24 hours in succession or two 12-hour segments. This week we're going to fast together, and you pick out of the 7 days in the week to fast for at least 48 hours together. That's either two 24-hour segments or four 12-hour segments, and you can space them however you want to space them. But we want to continue to consecrate and seek the Lord together. And maybe you're doing some other things in addition to this, but at a bare minimum, we ask you to do that with us as we share together and take this journey together. I want to commend those of you who have been going to the Facebook page, Embrace the Journey 365, and chronicling and sharing and synopsizing with us your experiences. Those things are powerful and impactful, and they encourage other people. This has been a blessed time so far, and we're going to continue today now with the subject of the presence of the Lord. This subject, as you know, the presence of the Lord is inexhaustible, but today begins a 4-day stretch. We're going to talk today, tomorrow, the next day, and the next about the presence of the Lord, because the presence of the Lord is powerful. Now, when I talk about the presence of the Lord, I know that God is omnipresent, as we shared in the book, that He's everywhere present simultaneously. But we asked you to give us some grace to at least agree that there are places where God's presence is more prominent there than it is in other places. Now, we could go into a long discourse biblically and prove our point, but give us that grace. And so, now, what brings the presence of God into a place in a greater way? Well, it's one of the things we've already talked about before. It's worship. Worship brings the presence of God into a place more prominently. The kabod, depending on the pronunciation that you choose, of God, which it lets us know that God's glory has weight and splendor. And so when God, and we've heard preachers say that the glory of God or the presence of God is when God begins to come in and throw His weight around. But the thing that brings God's presence in like that is worship. Now remember, the thing that allows us to worship in a greater way is the knowledge of God or the revelation of God. So it all tracks back to I can get God's presence in my life in a more dynamic way. The more I know Him, the more I can worship Him, the greater His presence in my life is. So it's systematic. We understand. So sometimes we just don't know how to do it. I want God's presence in my life in a greater way. And we do things and I'll just scream louder. No, I have to go back to the basics, come to know Him through His word, through prayer, through consecration. I get to know Him. He reveals Himself to me. I can worship on a greater dimension, which in turn brings His presence into my life in a greater way. And so when God is worshiped, He comes in a powerful way. The scripture talks about how when Solomon's temple was dedicated, that the glory of God showed up in such a magnificent way. Do you know what brought it? It was Solomon's revelation of how great God is. Watch this now. The Bible talks about how Solomon sacrificed excessively. The sacrifices that he offered was so exorbitant because he knew how great God was. And when you know how great God is, you worship Him in a greater way. Why? Because you know that He's worthy of it. And number two, because you know that, hey, if I'm going to worship God on a level that is acceptable to Him, I've got to come up in some areas. Now, we're going to be talking about those things in the days to come, but I want you to make sure that you are seeking the presence of God Listen, other people's presence is great. The President of the United States, the founder of this organization, this person, that person, good to be around them. But the presence of the Lord, there's absolutely nothing like it. God bless you. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow.